Introduction to the couple. Aya An and Meher's story wasn't one that began with fireworks or fairy tales. It began with simplicity, in the soft corners of everyday life. Aya An, a quiet, thoughtful man in his early 30s, was a schoolteacher in a small town. Known for his calm nature and warm smile, he had a love for literature and spent most of his evenings lost in books. Meher, on the other hand, was a spirited woman with a bold laugh and an artist's soul. She had moved to the town recently to open her own art studio, chasing a long-held dream that had taken years to build the courage for. Their paths first crossed at a local library, where Meher accidentally picked up a book Ayan had reserved. A casual conversation turned into an exchange of recommendations, which soon became regular meetings. They talked about everything: favorite poems, childhood memories, the struggles of growing up, and the quiet loneliness that often comes with chasing one's passion. Over cups of chai and walks under the fading sun, Ayan found in Meher a light he didn't realize he was missing. She was messy, spontaneous, and full of fire. He was organized, grounded, and introspective. Where he brought peace, she brought color. Their differences weren't barriers, they were bridges. Their bond grew deeper, not with grand gestures, but through quiet companionship. Ayan helped Meher set up her studio, painting the walls and organizing her supplies, while Meher started attending Ayan's school events, cheering from the back of the room as he guided his students through debates and plays. It was love built on admiration, patience, and genuine respect. Their families were surprised at first. Ayan's parents, traditional and reserved, weren't sure if Meher's free-spirited lifestyle would fit into their world. But Meher, with her heartfelt efforts and unwavering kindness, slowly won them over. She didn't try to change who she was. She simply showed them the love she had for Ayan. One evening, while walking by the riverside, where they had shared many silences, Ayan pulled out a small, handwritten letter instead of a ring. In it, he poured his heart, asking Meher to spend the rest of her life with him, not promising perfection, but a journey through all its mess and magic. Meher cried as she read it, nodded, and whispered yes. Their love story wasn't loud, but it was real. Built on shared glances, late-night talks, and an unspoken promise to always be there for each other. From that moment, they stepped into a new chapter, one that began with hope, trust, and the belief that love could weather anything. The dream wedding. The wedding day arrived like the first light of dawn, gentle, glowing, full of promise. The air was filled with the scent of marigolds and roses, as if nature itself had dressed up for Ayan and Meher. Friends and family gathered from near and far, bringing with them laughter, blessings, and stories of the couple that had touched so many hearts. Meher, dressed in a deep crimson lehenga with delicate gold embroidery, looked like she had stepped out of a dream. Her jewelry sparkled, but it was the happiness in her eyes that truly lit up the room. Ayan, in a classic cream sherwani, stood still as the world moved around him, his eyes only searching for her. When he saw her walking down the aisle, everything else faded. The crowd, the music, the noise. It was just her. The ceremony was a blend of tradition and personal touches. They chose to get married under the open sky, beneath a canopy of flowers, with soft folk music playing in the background. The rituals were performed with reverence, but also with moments of laughter and stolen glances. Every vow they took felt like a whispered promise between two souls who had already lived 1,000 lifetimes together. Meher's hands trembled slightly as Ayan tied the sacred thread around her neck, not from fear, but from the overwhelming emotion of the moment. Ayan, too, had to blink back tears as Meher circled the fire with him, each round a step into a future they'd dreamed of. After the ceremony, the celebration unfolded like a beautiful film. Fairy lights danced across the courtyard, and guests shared speeches filled with humor and heart. Their closest friends spoke of late-night phone calls, of the way Ayan looked at Meher when she wasn't watching, and how Meher lit up when she talked about him. The room was filled with joy, the kind that comes from witnessing something genuine, something rare. Their first dance wasn't choreographed. It was awkward, full of giggles and missed steps, but it was perfect. Ayan whispered that he was terrified of dancing, and Meher smiled and said, "Just hold me. That's all I need." That night, as the celebrations ended and the last of the sparklers faded into the dark, Ayan and Meher sat quietly on the steps outside the venue. Shoes off, hands entwined, still dressed in their wedding clothes. They didn't speak much, just looked at the stars and let the silence hold them. It was the kind of wedding people talk about for years, not because of the decor or the food, but because of the love that was so raw, so real, it left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. It wasn't just a union of two people, it was the start of something timeless. Early bliss. The days that followed Ayan and Meher's wedding felt like a quiet, beautiful dream. Life didn't change overnight, but it softened. Their home, a modest two-bedroom apartment tucked away on a quiet street, became their world. It smelled of fresh paint, new beginnings, and Meher's favorite vanilla-scented candles. They hung up photos from their wedding, filled bookshelves together, argued over where to put the coffee table, and laughed more than they ever had before. Every morning started with Meher humming in the kitchen, making overly sweet chai just the way Ayan liked it. He'd watch her from the doorway, half awake, but fully content. In the evenings, they'd sit on the balcony with their mugs, talking about everything, from silly office gossip to their dreams of traveling, of one day opening a school or hosting an art exhibition in a city far away. Weekends became mini adventures. Sometimes, they'd take long drives with no destination in mind. Other times, they stayed in, building pillow forts and binge-watching old movies, their fingers intertwined under blankets. Ayan began to sketch again, inspired by Meher's art. Meher started reading more, diving into Ayan's world of poetry and prose. They weren't just lovers, they were each other's biggest fans. They made lists, places they wanted to see, things they wanted to learn, goals for the next 5 years. There was a shared journal they kept by the bed, where they wrote notes to each other, sometimes funny, sometimes deep, always full of love. On one page, Ayan had scribbled, "Even on ordinary days, you make life extraordinary." Their differences, once noticeable, now felt like puzzle pieces that fit. Ayan's calm steadiness grounded Meher, while her spontaneity brought joy and surprise to his otherwise routine life. She'd drag him out for midnight ice cream runs. He'd make her tea and hold her quietly when her emotions overflowed. There were hiccups, of course, burnt dinners, forgotten anniversaries of first dates, minor disagreements about whose turn it was to do the laundry. But the love between them made these moments lighthearted. They'd argue, tease, kiss, and move on. Nothing lingered long. They were still in that golden phase where love seemed effortless. One night, lying on their rooftop wrapped in a blanket, Meher asked, "Do you think it'll always feel like this?" Ayan looked at her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, and said, "Maybe not always like this, but I'll always choose you, even on the hard days." That was the magic of those early months, simple days filled with extraordinary love. Everything felt possible, everything felt safe. It was the kind of happiness that didn't need to be posted or proved. It just quietly existed between two hearts that had found their rhythm. First signs of trouble. At first, it was nothing. Just little moments, small misunderstandings that seemed too minor to matter. Meher would forget to switch off the lights before bed, and Ayan, ever the creature of habit, would quietly do it himself, brushing off the annoyance. Ayan would come home from work tired and quieter than usual, and Meher would assume he just needed space, not realizing he was hoping she'd ask him how his day went. They still loved each other, deeply, but the rhythm they once danced to began to shift ever so slightly. Meher's art studio had started gaining traction. She was staying out later, attending exhibits, and networking with fellow creatives. Ayan was proud of her, but he missed their late-night talks and weekend drives. He didn't say much, not wanting to seem selfish. Meher noticed Ayan withdrawing, but chalked it up to stress at school. "He's just tired," she told herself. She left him little notes on his desk and sent silly texts during the day, but sometimes he forgot to reply. It stung, but she laughed it off. There were more of these tiny moments, unspoken disappointments, missed cues. Meher would suggest spontaneous getaways, but Ayan, now busy with academic projects and school responsibilities, would decline. Maybe next weekend, he'd say, not realizing how much she looked forward to them. When he finally tried to plan something, she had already committed to a gallery showing. They were slowly growing out of sync, though neither wanted to admit it. It was easier to believe it was just a phase. One evening, as Meher excitedly shared news about a collaboration offer from a well-known artist, Ayan nodded and smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He had just found out that one of his students was dropping out due to personal issues, and it had hit him hard. When Meher noticed his distant eyes, she asked gently, "You didn't even hear me, did you?" He sighed and said, "Not everything has to be about your studio, Meher." The silence that followed was heavy. It lasted only a moment, but it echoed. He apologized. She said it was fine. They both smiled, kissed, and went to bed. But in that quiet space between them, something had shifted. Neither of them realized how these small cracks, if left unnoticed, could one day turn into deep fault lines. They were still in love, still laughing, still sharing space. But slowly, unknowingly, they were beginning to live slightly separate lives under the same roof. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was subtle, like a slow drift in calm waters. They told themselves it was normal. Every couple goes through this. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "Something's changing." Growing distance. What once felt like a shared rhythm now began to feel like two different songs playing in the same room. Ayan and Meher still lived together, still had dinner together, still said good night. But something vital was missing. The conversations that used to flow so naturally now felt rehearsed, shallow, or sometimes entirely absent. Ayan became more absorbed in his work. He started coming home later, often preoccupied with lesson plans, staff meetings, or the growing pile of administrative duties he never used to complain about. Meher tried to wait up for him at first, but eventually gave in to exhaustion, eating dinner alone more often than not. She threw herself into her art, staying at the studio longer, attending weekend workshops, and collaborating on projects she once would have turned down to make time for Ayan. It wasn't out of spite. It was simply easier to be where she felt seen and valued. They stopped asking each other about their days, not out of anger, but out of habit. When they did talk, it was mostly logistical: bills, groceries, schedules. The intimacy of their words had been replaced with efficiency. Even their fights changed. In the early days, disagreements would end with laughter, a hug, or a heartfelt apology. Now, they ended with silence, avoidance, or sometimes one of them walking out of the room mid-conversation. Issues were left unresolved, buried beneath tired eyes and forced smiles. Ayan began to feel invisible. He missed the way Meher used to light up when he walked into a room, the way she used to ask about his students with genuine curiosity. Now she seemed distracted, somewhere else even when she was sitting right next to him. Meher, on the other hand, felt unappreciated. She missed the Ayan who used to leave notes in her sketchbook, who once waited outside her studio with coffee just to surprise her. She started to wonder if he even noticed her anymore, or worse, if he had simply stopped caring. One night, they sat across from each other at the dinner table, eating quietly. The clinking of cutlery filled the silence. "This is nice," Meher said suddenly, forcing a smile. Ayan looked up, confused. "What is?" "Us. Having dinner together." He nodded. "Yeah." The silence returned, heavier than before. They still loved each other. At least, they believed they did. But love was no longer enough. Not without effort, not without presence. The emotional gap between them had widened into a quiet chasm, and neither of them knew how to cross it. They shared a home, a bed, and a life, but they no longer shared their hearts the way they once had. And what made it worse was that neither of them could pinpoint the moment things changed. It had been so gradual, so quiet, but now the distance was loud. External pressures. If the emotional distance hadn't already taken root, the world outside their walls now began pressing in, slowly tightening the space between Ayan and Meher. It began with money. Meher's art studio, once a passion project filled with promise, was now struggling. Sales had dipped, commissions slowed, and rent kept climbing. She didn't say much at first. She tried to handle it on her own, taking freelance design jobs and working late into the night. But Ayan noticed the fatigue in her eyes, the way she sat longer at the dining table staring at her laptop, the growing pile of unopened envelopes. He offered to help, but his own finances were stretched thin. The school had cut back on funding, and Ayan had taken on extra duties just to cover their monthly expenses. They'd never had to talk about money before. Now it hovered in every room like a silent guest neither of them invited. Then came the interference from family. Ayan's parents, conservative and well-meaning, began calling more often, subtly questioning Meher's choices. Maybe if she stayed home more, things would be better, his mother had once said during a visit, loud enough for Meher to hear from the next room. Meher didn't react, but Ayan saw the hurt in her eyes. He should have defended her. He didn't. Meher's own parents, more liberal but equally concerned, started asking if she was happy. "You used to sound so excited when you talked about him," her mother said gently over the phone. "Now you just sound tired." Career stress became the final layer. Ayan, once passionate about teaching, now felt burnt out. He had lost a student to suicide, a quiet, troubled boy he had tried to reach. The guilt haunted him, kept him up at night. But he didn't know how to talk to Meher about it. Every time he tried, she seemed distracted, overwhelmed with her own burdens. So he stopped trying. Meher, meanwhile, felt like she was fighting a battle no one saw. The pressure to keep her studio afloat, to maintain her identity as an artist, to prove that her work mattered. It was crushing. She longed for Ayan's encouragement, for the version of him who used to believe in her unconditionally. Now, even when he tried to help, it felt like criticism. Stress began to live in their home, in the way they walked past each other, in the way meals were eaten quickly and separately, in the way good morning became routine, not affectionate. They weren't angry, not yet, but they were tired of pretending things were fine, tired of carrying the weight alone, tired of waiting for the other to reach out first. And through it all, they still clung to the hope that this was temporary, that the pressure would ease, that things would go back to how they once were. But hope, too, was starting to wear thin. A shocking betrayal. It happened quietly, like most heartbreaks do. Not with a dramatic outburst, but with a subtle shift, a moment that cracked everything. Meher had been spending more time at the studio, often staying late into the night. She said it was work, and it was. Mostly. But there was someone new, Armin, a visiting artist from another city, charismatic, warm, and deeply understanding of the chaotic world Meher lived in. He admired her art, listened when she spoke, and made her feel seen again. Not just appreciated, but understood. It started innocently, long conversations over coffee, shared frustrations about creative blocks, laughter over silly art memes. But soon, lines began to blur. A hand held a little longer, a gaze that lingered too deep, too long. Meher didn't plan for it to happen, but one evening, after a particularly emotional day, it did. One kiss, one moment she couldn't take back. She didn't tell Ayan, not right away. The guilt consumed her, twisting her stomach every time he looked at her with tired but trusting eyes. She thought it was a mistake, a lapse, something she could bury and move on from. But secrets have a way of showing themselves, even in silence. Ayan found out not from Meher, but from her journal. A page left carelessly open on the coffee table, words scrawled in panic and regret. "I don't know how to face him. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just one kiss. But it changed everything." He read it once, then again, and again. The world stopped. When he confronted her, Meher didn't lie. She couldn't. Tears welled in her eyes before she even spoke. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. It wasn't love, it was loneliness. But to Ayan, it didn't matter what it was. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a betrayal of everything they'd built. Trust, once broken, doesn't make a sound. It just collapses, quiet and complete. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just stared at her, expression unreadable, heart breaking in silence. "You could have talked to me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I was right here." "I tried," Meher replied, sobbing, "but we were both so far away." That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time since they got married. The house felt colder, the walls heavy with words left unsaid. Meher cried herself to sleep, while Ayan lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when their love had started slipping through their fingers. It wasn't the kiss that broke them. It was the realization that they had become strangers, living side by side, but no longer walking together. And now, something sacred had been shattered. The breaking point. The days that followed were marked by silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating silence that fills a home when love has fractured, and no one knows how to piece it back together. Ayan moved into the guest room, barely speaking unless absolutely necessary. Meher tried to keep busy, organizing drawers that didn't need organizing, cooking meals that went untouched, sitting on the edge of the bed at night wondering if he'd ever forgive her. The guilt was constant, but so was the ache of being pushed away. She had betrayed him, yes, but she was still here, still trying. But Ayan was no longer just hurt. He was lost. The betrayal had reopened every crack in their relationship. It wasn't just about the kiss anymore. It was about everything they hadn't said, every moment they had let slip away. He kept replaying the past in his mind, searching for signs, wondering how two people who once couldn't spend a moment apart had drifted so far. Then came the breaking point. It was a Sunday afternoon. They hadn't spoken in days. Meher finally walked into the living room, where Ayan sat reading, or at least pretending to. Her voice was calm but tired. "We can't keep doing this." He didn't look up. "I made a mistake," she continued. "A terrible one. But this Cold War, it's killing both of us." Ayan closed the book gently, finally meeting her eyes. His were hollow, not angry, just deeply, deeply wounded. "You didn't just kiss someone," he said. "You gave up on us." "I didn't give up. I was alone. You weren't there anymore." "I was right here, Meher." His voice rose, the pain spilling out now, raw and unfiltered. "Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I showed up every day. I stayed when things got hard. And you—" He stopped himself, voice shaking. "You chose someone else. Even if it was just for a moment. You chose not me." Tears streamed down Meher's face. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to fight for us." "And I'm asking," he said, stepping back, "when did you stop fighting?" The room fell silent again. But this time it wasn't avoidance. It was realization. This was no longer about who was right or wrong. It was about the truth they had both avoided for too long. They had lost each other long before that kiss. And now, standing face to face, they both knew something had broken beyond repair. Ayan walked toward the door, not slamming it, just stepping outside, needing space. Meher stood frozen in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of every memory, every laugh, every promise. This was the confrontation they had both feared, and yet somehow they knew it was inevitable. It was the moment everything that had been holding them together finally let go. Separation and reflection. The decision to separate wasn't made in a single moment. It unfolded like a slow, aching surrender. After the confrontation, neither of them said it aloud, but they both felt it. The end had arrived. Ayan packed a small suitcase 2 days later, not in anger, not in haste, just quietly. Meher stood at the doorway of their bedroom, watching as he folded shirts with the same care he used to fold laundry after Sunday brunches. It felt surreal. This man she had once promised forever to was now preparing to walk out of her life. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no shouting or slamming doors. Just a final exchange of glances that held more than words ever could: regret, sadness, love, and the weight of everything left unsaid. Ayan moved in with a colleague temporarily. Meher stayed in the apartment, now echoing with silence and memories. The home they had built together felt unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves had shifted. In the weeks that followed, they didn't speak much. A few texts about bills or keys, but nothing real. The distance was both a relief and a burden. It gave them space to breathe, but also space to feel the full weight of their loss. Ayan spent his evenings walking through quiet parks, headphones in, trying to make sense of it all. He replayed everything. When did they stop laughing? When did the warmth start to fade? Could he have done more? Should he have seen it coming? He missed her. Not just the version of her who used to dance in the kitchen, but the one who challenged him, believed in his work, saw him before he saw himself. But he also realized how much of his pain had come from being unheard, from carrying the emotional load silently while pretending everything was fine. Meher, meanwhile, found herself reaching for things that reminded her of him: a worn hoodie, the cup he always used, his half-finished novel still tucked beside the bed. She walked through their apartment like it was a museum of a life she used to live. She painted more now, pouring her grief and guilt into every stroke. Her newest piece was simply titled Stillness. It was abstract, cold, lonely, honest. Her art had never felt so raw. She missed him, not out of guilt, but because in losing him, she realized what they had truly shared: a love that had once been soft and sure, and how easy it was to let that love starve when life got too loud. In their separate spaces, they both reflected, not just on what went wrong, but on who they had become. The quiet revealed truths that pain had hidden. They had both made mistakes, both stopped showing up fully, both forgotten how to love the way they once had. And while they were no longer us, a part of them would always carry the imprint of what they once were. Emotional ending. Months passed. The seasons changed. What once was vibrant and full of possibility had now become a memory, an echo of a love that was once so real, so alive. Ayan had settled into a new routine. The apartment he now lived in was small, functional, a far cry from the space he had once shared with Meher. He started to heal, piece by piece, although some days still felt heavy. His students, his colleagues, his friends all saw the change in him. He was quieter, more reserved, but there was also a new strength in his eyes. He had learned to carry the weight of his own heart without depending on someone else to lighten it. Meher, too, had grown. Her art had blossomed in ways she hadn't expected. She started to exhibit her work in galleries, took on commissions from people who genuinely admired her talent. But even as her career took flight, her heart remained tethered to the man she once loved. She had learned so much about herself during their separation, about her own needs, her own shortcomings. And though she had found peace in solitude, a part of her still longed for the days when she wasn't walking through life alone. And then, one rainy afternoon, when the world felt like it had paused just for them, Ayan found himself standing outside Meher's studio. He hadn't planned it, hadn't even known why he was there. But as he stood there, watching the light spill out from the windows, something inside him clicked. He was ready. Not to fix what was broken, not to go back to what they had, but to move forward, to heal the last piece of his heart that was still caught in the past. Meher saw him from the window. She hadn't expected to see him again. The last time they spoke, the goodbye had been final, silent. She had moved on, or so she told herself. But when she opened the door, their eyes met in that moment, and everything they had shared rushed back. It wasn't a wave of anger or bitterness, but a soft, aching longing. "Ayan," she whispered. He smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. "Hi." They didn't say anything for a while. Neither of them knew where to begin. Finally, Meher spoke. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I didn't either," Ayan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But here I am." They stood there, feeling the weight of their shared past and everything they had lost. But for the first time, there was no pressure, no expectation, just two people who had loved deeply and had learned to let go. There was no promise of reconciliation, no certainty about the future. But for a fleeting moment, they both felt the same peace they had once shared, the same connection, unspoken but undeniable. "I'm sorry," Meher said, her voice breaking, "for everything." Ayan nodded, the words still stuck in his throat. But the truth was, he had forgiven her long ago. He had forgiven himself too. They had both made mistakes, but they had both grown, and sometimes growth meant knowing when to walk away, when to stay silent, and when to let go with grace. They stood there for a while longer, neither of them rushing to fill the silence with words that didn't belong. And in that silence, they both knew the truth. Sometimes love doesn't need a grand ending. Sometimes the most powerful conclusion is simply knowing that the love you shared was real, and that even if it wasn't forever, it will always be a part of you. Ayan turned to leave, but before he did, he paused and looked back at her one last time. "I'll always remember you," he said softly. Meher smiled, tears in her eyes. "I'll always remember you too." And with that, they parted ways, this time for good. But there was no bitterness, no anger, only the quiet understanding that some loves are meant to be beautiful, fleeting chapters of your life. Sometimes love isn't about forever, it's about what you learn and who you become in the time you share.